Okay, now we're on. And screen capture is always confusing. Here we go. This is what we need here. We're going to share this. And we're going to start here. Come on. There we go. Okay, it's yours.
Choose the keyboard.
You may need that one.
Okay. Okay, so as you can probably remember from Tuesday, our presentation is on student involvement by questioning, and those are our group members. So groups. Okay, raising.
Do you just want us to sit?
It's up to you. You can get up and move if you want to, or you can stay where you are. I mean, it works whatever way you all want to do it.
Okay. Essentially, I'm talking about student involvement, and the basic premise that students learn most effectively when they're actively involved and engaged in a lesson. So when we have these active roles, that kind of creates the need for clear learning objectives. So an example is Jose, science teacher. He has 3 main learning objectives, which are very clear and precise. Heat makes substances expand, makes molecules move faster, and expand means that molecules move apart. So the clarity and just the basic specificity makes it a real clear path for creating the lesson, as well as conducting it and carrying it out, which is, one of the main strategies and effective teaching practices that we've talked about a lot is, having a clear end in sight before you move forward. So clear goals and objectives are essential for 3 main reasons, okay? If the teachers aren't sure what they want their students to know, how can we know what they accomplished, and how do we guide their understanding? Number 2, helps make decisions about ways to represent content. So an example is a science teacher who has a basic idea that's represented in an item that the student can see, manipulate, and basically represent the idea through the item. And number 3, provide the conceptual framework for the interaction that is essential for student learning. So basically, it just gives you the clear picture, the outline of what you need to accomplish. So once you have clear goals and objectives to create that active learning environment, one of the main things you're going to focus on is content representations. So going back to that science teacher, his main ideas were, main concepts he wanted his students to know were the heat expands. So he would use an example of that would be a bottle attached to a balloon, and you heat up the bottle and the balloon expands so you can see right there in front of you the concept that you're trying to teach. And then so there's the examples of representations. You have models, vignettes, charts and matrices, demonstrations, and the real thing. So let's see here, helps to accommodate. One of the other main roles of content representations, besides getting the main idea across through a tangible example, is that it helps to create a diverse lesson. So it's a differentiation strategy that applies to any kind of student, it doesn't matter what culture you're from, what level of intelligence you are. A red lobster is going to be the same to every different kind of person. So that's the basic idea.
So I have,
Okay, yeah, next. Sorry.
yeah, I have the 3 functions of questioning, and there's a quote that I pulled from the reading passage. Teacher questioning is the most effective and generally applicable strategy teachers have for promoting student involvement. And so the first form or function of questioning is assessing current understanding. The second is increasing motivation, and the third is guiding new learning. Oh, it got a little bigger.
Cool.
So the questions that we ask can provide us information on where our students are at in that moment. And so if you're doing a math lesson, you can assess where the student's at in that moment by asking them a question about the math problem that you're wanting them to solve to see if they're understanding the content. And then if not, you can make decisions, which is the second point. You can make decisions on where to go next. So do you need to do a mini intervention on, like, to re-explain yourself and where you want them to go? And then it provides teachers with the knowledge and the knowledge of the students' learning processes. So instead of just seeing it on paper, like, oh, yep, they got the right answer, they must be doing it right. If you ask them questions, you can get more in depth, like, oh, here's their actual thought process on how they got from point A to point B. For increasing student motivation, you can ask questions to find out what they're interested in and what they're curious about. And then you can use these interests and curiosities to help guide your lessons in ways that make the lessons more interesting for the students, which in turn increases their motivation for wanting to learn the material. And using effective questioning also encourages higher order thinking questions, hot questions. And then for guiding new learning, effective questions help students relate and integrate new learning with existing knowledge. So since you already learned where they're at, you already know their existing knowledge. And so you can base your new lessons off of their existing knowledge in ways that they already know how to connect the information with stuff. And effective questions draw attention away from distractions like the ticking of the clock or, oh, recess is coming soon, and instead invite students to be focused in on the lesson and interested in the lesson. Why do the pictures cover up half the stuff? Your goal is to basically, when you ask a question, you want everyone in the classroom to think of their own response to it, which is a covert response. But then you don't get to call on everybody in a perfect world, or only in a perfect world. You get to call on everybody, hear everybody's answer. But reality is you only get to call on a few students at a time. And so hopefully they have already come up with a mental response. And then verbalizing that answer helps to clarify their information that they understand it, and it helps them connect it with other ideas that they've learned. And then correct answers should be reinforced and incorrect answers should be modified to help redirect their thinking into the correct direction.
So I had elements of effective questioning. So in teaching, it's a common thing that you're going to be questioning your students, whether you're teaching them, presenting them, or even just going over revisions. So there's 2 essential factors to effective questioning. First is clear and precise objectives, and secondly, a representation of the content. So within effective questions, I'll be breaking it down into a couple topics. The first one is questioning frequency, and that refers to how many times you're giving questions to the students. That could be to the class or it could be individual. And an effective teacher asks questions at a high frequency. As a result, the students are more engaged. So if you refer back to the videos that we watched on, let's see, what was that, Tuesday, we had a teacher that was constantly asking questions to the students. That's a high frequency learning environment. As a result, as we saw, the students were definitely way more engaged than if you were just to ask a couple questions here and there. The second portion is equitable distribution. And equitable distribution refers to how you distribute your questions. You're not always going to call on the same student, or you're not always going to call on the most or the more advanced students. Instead, what this is referring to is asking questions to the entire classroom. So you want to also allow other students to answer the question posed by the teacher, and that can be in the form of an open-ended question. Oftentimes, open-ended questions have way more answers than what you, the teacher, are currently thinking. And a lot of that is a result of the creativity of each individual student. So again, if you were to combine equitable distribution as well as high frequency questions, the student involvement increases as well as their understanding of the subject. And classroom problems also decrease and management improves. And the reason why is because you've got questions that are going to, let's say, your problematic students, so that they're engaged and they know that they need to be paying attention. As I mentioned earlier, there's open-ended questions, and these are just questions that all answers pretty much are okay. I mean, it's really up to the student and their creativity. The other thing about this that I thought was actually pretty intriguing was that virtually assured success. So when you do have students that have a high failure rate that seem that they never get the question right, they never get the answer right, giving them open-ended questions allows them an opportunity to feel successful, which is important in classroom management. It's important overall because you're also helping that kid grow, and his ideas or her ideas are definitely going to be beneficial to the classroom. It could add for more discussion and group-based learning. There is also prompting, and prompting refers to cues that teachers provide for the students who are unable to answer the original question. So cues, prompting, both of these, in my opinion, are kind of like rephrasing the question that was posed by you to the classroom or to the particular student. And they create a climate of support in the classroom. So when a teacher has promptings on students, that's also geared for the students that have kind of that high frequency failure rate, and that you can generally gain more success and more progress out of the question if you're there prompting the student the particular questions. And it also assists students in thinking through and answering specific questions. So maybe the student didn't understand exactly what the main portion of the question was. And so when you do prompt, maybe you highlight on that main idea of the question. Give the student a little bit of time to think about it, and then have the response from the student ready. So there's repetition for emphasis, and it asks, basically the teacher asks students to reconsider a question or a point that was made earlier in the lesson. There's a saying that goes that we all learn through repetition. And that's the most effective way that we learn is through repetition. Well, same goes for questioning. That when we question, oftentimes we will have to repeat ourselves multiple times throughout the lesson. I'm not just saying like, okay, what's 2 plus 2, what's 2 plus 2? But no, you might be able to say what's 2 plus 2, teach a little bit, go back to it, bring it back up again. And the interesting portion on this is that it's better to refocus the students than to not refocus them enough. And for my practicum that I'm in right now, it was interesting because on Wednesday when I did a lesson, they were completely focused, there was nothing wrong. And then yesterday, I taught them a lesson and they were out of control. Then today I went in to assess them and they were completely fine. I don't know what was up with it, but I tried to repeat myself and I tried to use a bunch of different classroom management techniques that were effective for a short period of time. Teachers and students also use wait time. And wait time refers to the amount of time behind a question that's posed by the teacher or the student. And the wait time allows for the student or yourself to formulate a response and to give that answer. So when there is wait time, you have to be effective at your time management as well as your class management skills. Sometimes you will have a student that takes advantage of that wait time and will kind of guide the class off topic, which then you have to refocus. So you have to be pretty careful on that. But teachers become more responsive to students by matching the wait time to the difficulty of question. You're not going to ask a super hard question and expect an answer immediately. Generally, that happens at your low level, very basic questions. But the more that you ask the student to kind of infer or reflect, those are the types of questions that you need to have a little bit more time with.
Okay, so think about what Brandon just said and talk to the person next to you about which of these questioning strategies you see your CTs use, and if you thought they were effective and what you would use in your own classroom. And then we'll share out. So go ahead.
I've seen my CT use always. Yeah, equitable distribution, not so much like if every once in a while, so then obstacle sticks out.
Yeah. She's just really good at it. And I think honestly, really, I can tell you like mostly she never like really adopt, especially if they're already and then she just doesn't.
No, I are fairly interactive. And then when she out and stuff, and then she comes back
So she doesn't really do like the project thing. No. So my teacher does that. So like, she did this and you like have an answer and then
I need to
try to ask it in a different way or like
because I asked it.
she really tries to like help.
And so then she always say
She really does try to encourage.
it's like it's kind of how they solve something. Mine was that she said to expect them to.
Oh, yeah.
So then they start telling you about
So when they get to
I want some, but chocolate's not good. It's like 40 hours.
after this, yes.
So good.
Okay, I'm gonna randomly select a few people. Okay, Hannah, what did you guys?
So my teacher doesn't really do any of them except for maybe a little prompting because she doesn't really ask them questions. But I have noticed a couple times I've overheard like when she's working with her reading group, she will prompt them a little bit, but she doesn't really do she doesn't really ask questions, so she doesn't really do any of these.
Is there a strategy that you would like to use in your own classroom that you think would be helpful?
Let's see. I like the idea of like the wait time, just because a lot of teachers like ask the question and then they immediately want someone to like raise their hand for an answer. So I like the idea of waiting, giving them time to like process their answers and say them.
Oh, Paige.
Well, as I was talking to Haley, I was kind of the same situation as Hannah. My CT doesn't really do much. Or if she does, I guess sometimes she does give wait time, but in my opinion, it's too long and stuff. So she'll like ask a question, not prompt the child if they're having trouble or anything, and she just keeps waiting and waiting and waiting. And in my opinion, it gets to where it's almost awkward and stuff instead of just moving on. So I guess I like the wait time idea, but there is a cap on it, so that's what I would want to implement.
How about Kimberly? In your group. Okay. You're taking notes like everything. Okay. In my class, my CT does ask questions, but it's mostly repetitive styling. And she keeps just repeating the question over and over and then making comments to the child. Do you think that's effective? For these kids, yes, their abilities. Okay, and Deidre.
So yes, I see a lot of strategies in the class.
And are they effective?
Yeah.
And what strategies would you use in your own classroom? And
Most of them,
Which one do you see the most?
because I like them.
Which one do you see the
I
most?
like the repetition because it helps, you just keep repeating it to the kids and then they like kind of just, yeah. I'm tired.
All right.
All right. So there are 4 additional issues that teachers need to think about. So there's high level versus low level questioning, how you question your students and how you select them. Call outs, which is where you have a student who's just shouting stuff out without raising their hand, and then choral responses where everyone answers together. So high level versus low level. High level sounds like they'd be better, but research shows that there's mixed results. Some show that yes, it is effective and that kids get better results. Some are like, it doesn't really matter one way or the other. The kids are still achieving the same results, whether it was high questioning or low level. And then there are some where the high questioning has made it so that the kids haven't really learned anything at all. And so the reasons are because we have the objective for the lessons. So if you're working on math and you just want them to know their times tables, low level questioning is effective. So that'd be like, what's 7 times 9? And then they would respond 63. What's 5 times 5? 25. So low level is effective for that. But if you want them to understand the impact of Columbus's discovery of the New World, then you want to ask them higher questioning so that they can take and be able to completely answer that question. So it's all like, why did Columbus travel? How did he find the New World? What did he think? Where did he think he was? So you want to have things that they can really will help them get to the overall goal. And then it also depends on the age of the student. So that repetition of the low level questionings are just better for those kids because it's something that they can grasp. But then with the older kids, you don't want to bore them by asking them yes or no questions. You really want to make them think and stuff and keep them engaged. So selecting students, we should select both volunteers and non-volunteers. So you can call in a student who has their hand raised, and then call in a student who doesn't have their hand raised, and then that way you know that they're participating and they still have to think about it. And if they're like, oh, I'm not ready, then you call back, and you're like, okay, well, I'll call in someone else, but I'm coming back to you, so make sure you have your answer ready. And then the other pattern that you can do is just to call on students randomly. And so good teachers do this by mentally remembering on which students they've called on throughout the lesson. And if you do lose track, you can just be like, who haven't I called on yet? And they will always raise their hand, almost always raise their hand. And if they don't and they haven't been called on, their peers will be like, oh, Brandon hasn't answered yet. Brandon, you need to raise your hand. So it promotes a comfortable environment to call on both non-volunteers and volunteers, and just by making sure you're not calling on the same person every single day for every single lesson. So call out. So like I said, that's when students are just shouting stuff out at you. So there are exceptions that they should be prevented as much as possible, but the exceptions include minority students, students from low socioeconomic backgrounds, and low achieving students. And the reason is they all feel like they can't succeed. So Jose allowed one of his low leveling students to call out, he asked a question, the student just called out. And so he didn't even acknowledge it. He wasn't like, oh, we need to raise our hand. He's just like, yes, very good. Now who can elaborate on this for me? And then he called on someone else to help. And so that builds confidence for the students. So then they'll want to be engaged in it. And they want to be involved in the questioning. And call outs are bad because they can take and decrease the thinking time for the other students. I think there's more. So choral responses, that's where kids are saying things at the exact same time. Those are good for practicing skills and terms and facts that should be overlearned and available for immediate recall. So again, math facts. It's commonly used in foreign language responses. So the teacher will say something and then the whole class says it back, and that's just for help with fluency and to make sure you have the pronunciation right. And then, but they are inappropriate for open-ended questions. So just be chaos if I was like, everybody, tell me your favorite color.
Blue.
Green.
Orange, green.
I mean, yeah, so it's just chaos. And then, if you have a student who, it just allows for students to become off task, and when everyone else is talking, they can be whispering to their partner and not talking back. Kimberly. Yes, thank you. Now we're gonna play You'll know all the answers. What? Hold on.
Oh shoot, I don't know if it's signal.
Is this gonna mess it up?
Probably.
You're okay, as long as you don't stop the screen share.
Okay.
Just switch to a different screen.
We're playing Kahoot.
I don't know, I'm trying to get internet first.
It's okay, because Mackenzie still has to sign in.
Let's see.
It's okay, just not IT.
Oh, sorry, I thought you heard me too. I was just leaving it as it goes. Oh, okay. Sorry. That was me, but I didn't do let's see.
Just have this one bird.
Well, thank you for saying Lacey, that was nice.
My birds are like monsters. Yeah, mine are like. They're like. Oh, sure.
Sure, okay.
We all do it. Gosh, my internet is not working.
Okay.
Oh, she's a
You don't have an advantage in three questions.
Anna, you're fast. Woo, better than. There you go. Thanks. We should have all done a
Someone else better than you.
Is everybody signed in? Are you guys ready? Yeah, let's do this. Are you ready? There's 13 questions.
Oh, no.
Oh, dang it. What is the function of questioning?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, it's all of them, right?
Yeah,
Or
so it's
Atlas.
So it's those three that have the check marks. So if you pick any one of those, you got it right.
Oh, it's such a
That stressed me out because I was like, wait a second.
I don't think there's too many.
You go to someone else and better than you.
Crap.
I don't know, two elements of effective questioning are
I'm not really sure. I never am. I would agree. We'll see. Still watch someone else.
I'm behind the old lady.
Like Katie said, when you're creating questions, you want your objectives to be clear and you want your questions to represent them.
Nice.
It should be. Come on.
Yes.
So the special cases would be minority students, students from low socioeconomic statuses, and low achieving students.
Better than all of you.
What?
Guess that's way down.
Well, I'm really sad right now.
Oh, I don't know this one.
I don't know.
Oh, yes, I do. You do, and just confuse me for some reason. Ian. Better than you is still on top. Hannah is creeping.
Not sure if this is me.
Always. Get out of here. Slowly creep it up. I would say that my teaching is effective because you guys understand it.
Good job.
Or I'm gonna guess her.
Send me like once.
Oh, little tricksters you. It does make them
Nice. Good job, though.
Nobody
Nobody
could
could better.
Good
Good job.
Yes.
That's cool.
Watch out, Anna's gonna get shot.
I know, she's
We're
just
just gonna fall.
slowly.
Anna just blows out her phone.
Slaps my phone down. She is quicker than me, that's the problem. It's just slowly just comes a couple hundred points closer. Ooh.
Which side are you gonna be on?
You really went up fast. It wasn't fast enough.
So close.
It's like once you
go.
fall down,
Wow.
you went fast.
Nice, I like it.
There.
So what's up? How many questions are there? I need it to just be over. I never win.
You could.
Oh, it was lame.
You could quit if you want.
So nervous.
Good job.
I'm behind Jenny.
He's not better than you.
Oh, they switched up. Did you switch As soon as I saw it switch, it's like, this is where I lose her.
I had that right in my mind. Oh, I was like, oh, true. I was like, oh. Oh.
D is on fire.
Oh, yeah.
How do they have the highest one? We all have a streak of 12. This is I'm number one.
Learn more and retain
Done. No way.
Oh, so
It's
we're
too
doing that
far.
now. I'm like behind the door, you bet.
Good job, everyone.
Better than you.
Whoa.
Better than you. You.
Okay, are there any questions? Do you guys have any questions for us?
Well done.
You guys
Okay.
did.
I cleared them. Just made sure I I know. It's the other one. Sometimes you have to just take the
Nice
chance.
job, guys.
And we should do a
Is it
stop
really
screen
this
share. I want to add a few things to what they've done, but I want to get rid of these things. Somewhere here we're going to
Are they still
It's
with us?
when you get
Really?
to, go down to the bottom, Dr.
You
Evans,
do
to
it.
where the little Google thing is, on those. Yeah,
left or right.
go left, right there.
I want to stop the screen share. There we go. Whoops.
Bye.
Okay, now it's just back to us.
Oh, it's still on
broadcast.
Stop broadcast.
Bye.
Right there.
I want to stop the broadcast.
Oh, okay.
Because I want them to hear the last little comments.
Sorry, softball players, we definitely tried to keep class on guys.
And I am strategically placed where I can keep my eye on the clock. We've got 16 minutes, and so I'm going to be done by 2, and then you'll have the rest of the afternoon to do what you're going to do.
That was question.
No,
Well, these are
Wait,
exciting.
no. That's what you get.
No, first of all, nicely done. You've covered the content well, and you've hit the main points, and that's good. So appreciation to all of you for what you did, and the preview that we had on Tuesday, and then the follow-up today. I want to give you some additional things, and I do this with all the groups. Okay, this is not something that you said wrong or needs to be corrected, and these are not things that you overlooked that you should have brought up. It's just I wait and see what kinds of issues you bring up, and then I add a few more pieces as well, just to give you a little bit more perspective and a little bit more things to think about. Brandon brought up a bit about wait time, and that's so important. I actually had written it down here. Research for years has shown that when you use wait time, the optimal time is 3 seconds. Wait at least 3 seconds when you ask a question. And that seems to be the tipping point. Waiting that much changes the kinds of responses that you get. And the research shows that when you wait for the responses, you increase the number of responses that you get from the kids, and you increase the quality of the responses because they've had time to think. And sometimes teachers will call it think time, not wait time, because it's the same thing. But you ask the question, and then you give them 3 seconds, you just mentally kind of count it off. And with kids, you have to be directive sometimes. You say, okay, I'm going to ask a question, no hands, I don't want any hands in the air, everybody think this through, okay? You have to be directive with them and tell them, otherwise, you'll get the kid that just the minute you stop talking, his hand is in the air kind of thing. There is a difference, second point here, there is a difference between what we call an authentic question and an inauthentic question. Now, it's not that one is good to use and one is bad to use. It's not like you should be using these and not those. But you need to know which one you're using, what type of question you are using, because if you are asking a question with one purpose in your mind, but you phrase it differently, the kids are going to think you're asking for a different purpose, and then you don't get the quality of the response that you want. An authentic question is one where you yourself really do not know the answer that you're going to receive from the kids. That's an authentic question. That's one that you ask because you don't know, and you really want to find out from the kids. Like if I were to ask Paige, Paige, what's your favorite restaurant to go to? If you had a restaurant, favorite one to go to? I don't have a clue what her answer is going to be, but it is.
I like going to Red Lobster.
Red Lobster.
On the spot.
Now that's an example of an authentic question, because I really don't know what the answer is, and I can't presuppose what her answer is going to be, and then tell her, well, you answered wrong because
Red Lobster's not the best.
that's the point.
Actually, Joe's Crab Shack.
Yeah.
I panicked.
I want to change my answer.
And Brandon kind of hit on this with some of what he was bringing up in his little section about open-ended questions, okay?
Give me enough free time.
Be careful about open-ended questions. They often come across as being authentic. The surface level, it's authentic. But if you ask it in a way that it appears to be an authentic question, but you're really fishing for a specific answer from the kid, then the kid doesn't give you the answer that you expect or that you want, then it gets the mental processes all tied up. So, ask a question. If it's an inauthentic question, it is one where you know the answer that you want to get. And there are good and appropriate reasons for doing that. Let me give you a couple of examples. An inauthentic question would be if I were to ask any of you in here, what's 2 times 2? I know the answer to that. It's not an authentic question. I'm not asking it because I don't know. I'm asking it for a different purpose. I'm asking to see if you know, or to review, or just to practice, okay? So use both kinds, but do be aware of the fact that, if you are asking an authentic question, surface level, I've got a great story to tell you about this. Authentic question, but the kid takes it as an authentic question, but you don't really have it in, you're phrasing it the wrong way. You're going to get something that you didn't expect, and you've got to be willing to live with it. And here's the cute story. Supposedly, I don't know if it's really true or not, but it's a great story. A teacher reading a story to the class, and one of the characters in the story was a pig, and animals that talk. And so the Farmer Smith or Farmer Jones was doing something and looked over at the pig, and the pig talked and said something, talked back to the farmer. And the farmer is just kind of like, oh. So the teacher stops and she looks at the little kids and she says, now boys and girls, what do you think Farmer Smith would have said to the pig? Okay, now that's an authentic question in some ways. It appears to be an authentic question, but the teacher was thinking, I know what I want to hear from the kids. So the teacher asked, boys and girls, what do you think Farmer Smith said when he heard that pig talk to him? And one little kid raises his hand and he says, well, I'll bet the farmer said, holy shit, a talking pig. Now, would that not be a logical, reasonable answer for somebody? I don't know, it's, third grader or second grader or something like that. My point is, be careful about what you are asking and how it comes across. Because if you're asking for something where you know the answer, or you're fishing for the answer, but you ask it in a way that it appears to be open-ended and authentic, be prepared for the answer that you may get that might knock you off your socks a little bit or surprise you. Now, yeah, Kim.
I was gonna say, okay, so we're gonna stop right here.
Yeah.
What would a teacher say to a third grader that uses that kind of remark?
If it were me, I would say, thank you for sharing that, let's move on.
That answer beats all of your guys' answers.
We're moving on.
Don't get, I'm gonna put it kind of crudely, but don't get your knickers in a wad when a kid says something like that. It's just like, thank you for sharing, and then just like move right on. If you make a big deal about it, you're gonna validate it and give it even more importance than it's worth. You don't even dignify it. Don't tell it, oh, you shouldn't say that kind of thing. Just say, thanks for sharing that, let's move on. Just handle it that way. There are perfectly appropriate, very appropriate, inauthentic questions that you can and should be using. Let me list off a couple of them, a couple of reasons for them. You can, and you did hit on this, it was in your presentation, you can use questions for purposes of reviewing or reciting, recitation. You want to see who knows it and who doesn't. You've been practicing times tables and you want to find out, okay? Who knows the times tables? So you just toss them out. 2 times 2. Don't answer this, please, okay? But you would just go 2 times 2. Paige. 2 times 2. Michaela. 2 times 2. Deidre. 2 times 2. Mackenzie. You want to see if they know it, right? You just want to see if they know the answer. It's for recitation and review. Sometimes you want to ask questions that are open-ended, and you want to do it for purposes of discussion. To discuss something means you want to explore all of the different possible elements, all the different sides of an issue, all of the different components of an issue. So you're going to debate, I'll just pick something out of the air here. There's proposals that come across in Oregon every once in a while for a sales tax. Okay, so let's discuss, not debate, not argue, let's discuss the issue. What would be all of the different things that we would need to know about the implications of having a sales tax in Oregon? If it was at a certain percent, how much money would it raise? What would it cost retailers? What would it cost consumers? What would it do? There's all these kinds of issues. Those are discussion questions, which later can go into something like trying to take a position, or a con. There are questions for literary interpretation, which is very closely aligned with close reading. I hope you've talked about that in language arts. How many of you, we'll show of hands real quick, how many of you have read The Giver by Lois Lowry? Okay. Now, we know now, because it's been 20-some years since the book was published, we know what Lois Lowry meant at the end of the book, when Jonah escapes the colony and, in the cold and the snow and sees the lights and, that kind of thing. When that book was first published, there was huge debate about what does the ending of that story mean. Did he live or did he die? Is this, he escaped and found the other colonies out there and survived? Or is this all his mind shutting down and his imagination as he is slowly dying in the cold and great discussion going back and forth. When you have kids reading something, a piece of literature that can be open in its interpretation, not something simple like what colored dress did she wear, or what was the name of the dog, those are pretty low level questions. But a piece of text, a story, a book, where there can be multiple ways to interpret the meaning of it, those can be interpretive questions. And what you need to do with interpretive questions, I'm going to steal a little bit from my language arts counterparts. Bring the kids back and always have them justify it from the text. What did the author say? What's in the text that can justify your interpretation? Is there a particular word the author used? Does the author phrase it a certain way? Are there hints? Is there foreshadowing? Are there little things dropped in there? How do you know? Not how do you know from your experience, how do you know from what the author wrote, what Beverly Cleary wrote here, what Lois Lowry wrote here, what Gary Soto wrote here? What's in the text that can back up your meaning, your interpretation? Those are questions for literary interpretation. Just a couple, 2 or 3 other things. There's Socratic questions. Socrates. Okay. One of the biggest things I heard a person say incorrectly in a non-school meeting that I was in one time. This guy was giving a presentation, and he said, Socrates taught by using questions. And me, and my cocky, smart aleck self, just sat there and thought, you don't know what you're talking about. Okay? Because Socratic questions are not just a bunch of questions. It's not just tossing out, well, what about this? It's not that. Socratic questions are the kind that really probe your understanding and really press your understanding. So somebody says, okay, I think we should have a sales tax in Oregon. Okay, well, what would be the implications then for mom and pop businesses? Well, I don't know. Well, then you need to go find out. If a little family-owned business has sales of $500,000 a year, how's that going to affect their customer base? Well, I don't know. Well, then you need to go find out. That's Socratic questioning, where you push them deeper, and they got to really think about it and challenge their assumptions, and maybe some of their assumptions are wrong, and they have to acknowledge that. Those are Socratic questions, and those are ones you're probably going to use with many, many older kids. 3 other things, maybe 3. I'm watching the clock here. There was research done years ago about how teachers use questions in classrooms. And it led to a body of research literature called TESA, T-E-S-A. T-E-S-A, and it's an acronym, and it stands for Teacher Expectation, Student Achievement. TESA, Teacher Expectation, Student Achievement. And here's what they found. Number 1, teachers do this unconsciously. They don't do it purposefully. They don't do it intentionally. This is subconscious, unaware that they're even doing it. But teachers tend to focus their questions on the kids that are right straight in front of them and the kids that are sitting across the front row or 2. And the kids that are kind of back in the corners in the periphery of the room generally don't get called upon as much. It's subconscious. They don't even realize they're doing it, but they call on the kids that are sitting more right in front of them, and they call on the kids that are sitting directly straight in front of them this way, kind of like a T shape, inverted T. And the point of TESA was to bring that to the attention of teachers so they could become more conscious about who am I calling on? I forget which person mentioned it in your presentation, but making sure that you distribute questions around the room and asking, who have I not called on at this point? Who's not had a chance to offer something here? That's being conscious, thoughtful about your questioning strategies. As you might suspect, that research spun off in a different direction, and the next version of it was called GESA, G-E-S-A. Something, expectation, student achievement. Anyone want to take a guess as to what the G stands for?
Yeah. Gaining.
Close. Close.
What did you say?
Gender.
Oh, gender.
Gender expectation. GESA, G-E-S-A. Gender expectation, student achievement. And what they found, again, unconscious, subconsciously, teachers gave different kinds of questions to girls than they did to the boys. And they called on the boys more than the girls. They had different expectations of girls and boys based on just gender. The girls typically got the harder questions, the higher level questions, interestingly enough. Okay, so be attentive to who you call on. Are you calling on the boys and the girls equally? Are you generally sprinkling your questions around the entire group? Or are you just focused physically on the kids right in front of you, straight in your line of vision, or straight right across in the row in front of you? And my last piece, I've got tons of things I can put on here, but my last piece is try as much as you possibly can to put the question out first, then call on the student. We typically do it this way. We look at the student and we say, Mike, what's the answer to? Or Mike, what is the such and such? And then Mike's sitting there going like, and all the other kids are going like, oh, I'm glad she didn't call on me. Flip it, flip it. Put the question out there first. What is the answer to problem number 6? Everybody think of the answer, problem number 6, because I'm gonna call on somebody. Nobody knows who's gonna get called on. Everybody got an answer, problem number 6? And then you pull the popsicle stick out of the jar, or you just pick the kid. You know, that's what everybody's trying not to make eye contact. You know. Okay, we all do it. We all do it. It's like faculty meetings. You know, the dean says, "I need a volunteer for something," and that's when we all start taking it. Call on the kid after you ask the question, because then it ups the ante. They don't know who's going to get called on. And not only that, but ask the same question multiple times. Say, okay, I'm going to call on 3 of you. Number 6, I'm going to call on Mike, I'm going to call on Sarah, and I'm going to call on Sam. Okay? Or I'm going to call on 3 people. Same question, 3 people. And if a kid says, well, you know, I'm not really sure of the answer, you say, okay, good, pay attention, because I'm going to call on 2 other people, and then I'm coming back to you. And the other 2 people are going to have the answer. And then you come back to the first kid, and you go, now he knows the answer, so now he can answer it. Okay? So it doesn't let him off the hook. Say, okay, hold on, pay attention, because I'm going to call on 2 more other people, then I'm coming back to you. I'm coming back to you. Okay? Yeah.
So when you're calling on multiple students to answer a question, would you just wait till all 3 of them have answered to like give them like the feedback? So you would just say, okay, and then move on, or would you say, good job, that's correct, and then ask the next one?
I would be inclined not to give them the feedback right away.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I would say, okay, let's get the answer from you. Okay, let's get an answer from you. Let's get an answer from you. Now, we seem to be getting the same answer here. Agreed? Everybody agreed? Do they have the right answer? Then you can validate it. Then you can validate it. And last but not least, we're a little bit past, sorry, I apologize. Last but not least, avoid the deadly, who can tell me kind of question. Who can tell me the names? Who can tell me what SMART stands for in SMART goals? Who can tell me? It's like, well, I can't tell, you know. Just make it a statement. Tell me. Don't put the who can. Tell me. Don't say who knows. Just tell me. Tell me, what does S stand for in the acronym for SMART goals? What does the M stand for? Don't ask who can tell me what the M stands for. Just say, okay, tell me what the M stands for. I'm going to do it with all of you right now. You've got 3 seconds. Tell me what the M stands for.
Is it a plural response?
3 all together?
Manageable.
There you go. See?
Manageable, something a mold with an M.
Something about something about something about.
And something else.
Okay, I have 2 things for you before you go. 2 things before you go. Announcement kind of thing. We will also use this room next Friday for the same reason, so we can record it. So Tuesday, we'll be back over in a regular classroom. I will not be here Tuesday, but I have a substitute, and Tuesday we have a brief presentation on the next chapter, the next reading. And then the rest of the time on Tuesday is not free time. The rest of the time on Tuesday will be about task 3 from NTPA. So be prepared to spend time Tuesday, normal class time, okay? Secondly, if you were part of the presentation today, or Kimberly and Marissa on Monday, you don't have any follow-up assignment based on this topic. Your presentation was the assignment. The rest of you do have a follow-up assignment. It is on Canvas. Don't do it immediately, super soon right away, but it's there, okay? It should only show up for those of you that are supposed to do it. If you're part of the group presenting, it should not even show up for you people. It shouldn't even be there, okay? Your group score today is based on what you people are going to score these folks. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. They have passed these.
So,
One, two.
How about those 4s though?
So, 1, 2,
Okay, there should be enough here. I think you're gonna have to pass them all the way over. Well, give me this one, right? And then pass them all the way over to Tasha, because the rest of you were in the presentation. Score the presentation according to the scoring guide here. I don't want your names on these. I don't care, that's not important. When you have scored it, hand it to me, and I'll tally them up after class and look at the scores on your page, okay? And with that, thank you. We are done.
Have a good weekend.
You too.